I'll never forget the way it started. Not with a kiss, not with a look, but with a knock. A knock so heavy that it seemed to echo through my entire life. If you've ever been behind on rent, you know that sound. It's not just a rap on the door, it's a reminder that your freedom, your peace, even your home, could be snatched away in a second. And that night, when I opened the door, I didn't just let in my landlord. I let in a storm that would change everything. My name is Elise Monroe. I was 39 years old, freshly divorced, starting over in a small apartment outside of Atlanta. I thought moving into that quiet place with its thin walls and peeling paint would mean freedom. Instead, it felt like silence, like walking barefoot across the broken pieces of all the decisions that had led me there. I was working double shifts at a diner, trying to rebuild, but I was exhausted. And when the rent came due, I realized I didn't have it. His name was Marcus Hayes. He wasn't just a landlord. He was the kind of man who filled a room before he even spoke. Tall, broad-shouldered, with skin like warm bronze, and a presence that made you feel both nervous and intrigued. He wore simple things, a white t-shirt, jeans, a gold chain that caught the light, but it was the way he carried himself that told you he was in control. From the first day I met him, I noticed the way he looked at me. Not like a landlord looks at a tenant, but like a man studying a secret he planned to uncover. When I opened the door that evening, he didn't smile. He just leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching me like he already knew I didn't have what I owed. "You were going to call me, weren't you?" he said, his voice calm but heavy, like thunder right before it breaks. I swallowed hard and nodded. I need more time. I'll have it by next week, I whispered. He stepped inside without asking, closing the door behind him. My chest tightened. He wasn't rushing, wasn't angry, just deliberate. "Time doesn't keep the lights on, Elise," he said softly, but it cut deeper than if he'd yelled. I backed away slowly as he closed the distance between us, his eyes locked on mine. "I could evict you today," he murmured. My breath caught, waiting for the blow. Then he added, "But I won't." When I asked him why, he looked at me in a way that made my knees weak. "Because you've got something more valuable than rent." My heart raced. I told myself to push him back, to say no. But the truth? Part of me had already noticed the way his eyes lingered, the way his voice rumbled, the way his presence filled the silence I had been drowning in. And worse, part of me had liked it. He brushed a hand against my cheek, and even though my body flinched, I didn't move away. When he kissed me, it wasn't tender. It was certain, like he already knew I wouldn't resist. My breath caught in my throat as something deep inside me cracked open. For a moment, I forgot about the rent, the fear, the shame. All I could feel was the heat of his body against mine and the dangerous pull I couldn't explain. When it was over, I slid down against the wall, my legs trembling, my heart pounding. He zipped his jacket, looked down at me with a calm grin, and said, "Consider this month taken care of." Then he walked out like nothing had happened. That night, I lay awake tangled in sheets that still smelled faintly of him. I told myself I should feel ashamed, but instead, I kept replaying every second. The way his voice wrapped around me, the way my body had answered before my mind could catch up. I hated that I wanted more. And I hated even more that I knew he would come back. And he did. The next evening, Marcus was waiting outside by his car when I got home from work. My legs weakened the second I saw him leaning against the hood, that same quiet grin tugging at his lips. He didn't need to ask. He just tilted his head toward the stairs, and I followed. Inside his apartment, the air was thick with cologne and something darker, temptation maybe. The lights were low, soft R&B hummed from the speaker, and a bottle of Hennessy sat open on the counter. He poured me a glass, then looked at me with eyes that seemed to peel away every excuse I had left. "This is how it's going to be," he said plainly. "When I call, you come. In return, you don't worry about rent again." I froze, glass trembling in my hand. It wasn't just an offer, it was a deal. A choice. The smart answer was no. But when his hand slid against my waist, when his breath brushed against my ear as he whispered, "Don't fight it, Elise," I knew I was already too far gone. Days blurred into nights. We fell into a rhythm I told myself wasn't real. Sometimes it was rushed, stolen moments when he came to my apartment. Other times it was slower, almost intimate, like he wanted me to forget he was my landlord at all. And against every reason, every warning in my chest, I started to want him. Not just his touch, but him. But the thing about men like Marcus is they don't belong to anyone. One evening, I came home to find a note slipped under my door. For words, "It's not just you." My stomach dropped. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He smirked and said, "I told you I never promised you love." That night, I cried until my pillow was soaked. But when he came to my door again, I still opened it. I hated him for the way he made me feel disposable. And I hated myself even more for still wanting him. It wasn't until I met someone else that I realized how deep I was drowning. His name was Noah, a quiet dishwasher at the diner, younger, soft-spoken. He looked at me differently. Like I wasn't broken, like I wasn't something to use. He laughed at my jokes, walked me home, made me feel like the woman I used to be. For a moment, I thought maybe I could choose differently. But Marcus found out. And when he showed up in my apartment with a key I hadn't known he had, the truth sank in. I wasn't free. Not really. He leaned close, his voice colder than I'd ever heard. "You think you can play house with someone else? Don't forget who owns this place." That was the night something shifted in me. The Elise who had whispered apologies into the dark, who had let herself be consumed by loneliness and desire, she died quietly. When Marcus leaned over me, waiting for the same response I'd always given, I looked him in the eyes and said, "She's gone. Whatever fire you think you lit, it's out." For the first time, he didn't have a reply. He didn't come back after that night. The silence that followed was heavier than ever, but this time I didn't let it break me. I sold what I could, begged my boss for an advance, and found a spare room in another town with an older woman who asked no questions. I packed a single suitcase and left. I didn't just leave the apartment. I left behind the version of me who waited for someone else to define her worth. The scars are still there, of course. They always will be. But scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you survived. And if you've made it this far into my story, I want you to know, sometimes the hardest thing isn't leaving someone who hurt you. Sometimes the hardest thing is leaving the part of yourself that let them.